Ahsoka, Balance of Truth, Book 1, Chapter 28. Ani, strap in. I'm making the jump, Ahsoka chimed over the onboard comm. A slight crackle, then good to go. Ahsoka blew out a deep breath and engaged the hyperdrive. Executing the directive she had confidently set herself on, she was still somewhat apprehensive about what awaited them on the other end of this. She could not ignore the overwhelming nervousness creeping closely toward consuming her, bridging by fear to a conclusion no one could foresee. She felt betrayed by ambition and selfish motivations she could not pinpoint the source. Ahsoka was confident she was destined for this path, but the confusion of recent events, thrusting her mind in many different directions, caused her to pause. The children had always been her priority, and that list of involvement was long, consuming her past and present. The swirling blue, where time stood still, yet did not, had a matter of putting things into perspective. She could not live in the past. Mistakes were made, choices made, none of which could be undone. But she could live for a present that was ever more populated by young ones with a high degree of attunement to the Force, not so young ones who had lost their way, and those who were destined to make a difference. She thought immediately of Luke. Although his destiny was shrouded from her view, she trusted both Jedi Masters implicitly with their wisdom, as it were, to guide her toward other endeavors. She had Ani. The thought made her smile, but what came so quickly as a feeling of joy and purpose clouded over with the dark mist of the unknown. Kawani had added another element to herself with Zar, and Ahsoka wasn't sure if it was a good or terrible thing yet. She trusted Kawani, but the Mirialan was generally naive to the Force. She let the thought play out in her head while trying to tune out the clattering noise her friend considered music. Ani, where's your headset? She asked, wrinkling her nose as the bass rattled the ship's hull again. There was no immediate response. Ani? What's up? The voice was right behind Ahsoka. She spun around to face it. I thought you were still in the cargo bay. Oh yeah, I was, but I couldn't hear what you said over the comms, Kawani replied. Rolling her eyes, Ahsoka swiveled back in her seat, shaking her head. I get the feeling you don't much appreciate the tunes. Kawani planted herself in the co-pilot's seat, facing her. Come on, Ahsoka, everyone appreciates music. Ahsoka stifled a laugh. Music, yes? That, no, she said, the laugh escaping her despite her efforts. Kawani rolled her eyes. It takes an appreciation of all music to get a feel for the types you truly love. I could not agree more, Tsar commented. Not now, Kawani thought, appeasing the voice, at least temporarily. Ahsoka did not bite, despite reasoning the logic within the statement. What is it, Ahsoka? What is on your mind so heavily? Surely it isn't music. Kawani was silent momentarily before saying, The Tsar thing? Ahsoka looked down at the control panel in front of her before saying anything. No, Ani, it isn't either. Your music is a part of who you are. As for Tsar, I can't say I trust his motives. That hurts, Tsar muttered. But I trust yours, Ahsoka finished. Then, the feeling is fleeting at times, elusive at others. There are so many questions with no answers, Ani. Things that don't make sense, too many loose ends. She trailed off in either thought or memory. Kawani couldn't decide. Lay it on me. Maybe we can figure something out together, she said, a matter of fact. Ahsoka did not alter her gaze as she unclipped Master Windu's saber hilt from the loop at her waist. She held it firmly, eyes locked intently. You should not have been able to disassemble my saber. She looked furtively toward Kawani, trying to see Tsar within. Even with his assistance, she cast her eyes back on the hilt again. Kawani took the pause as an injection point for a carefully crafted defensive plan. Then why assign me the task? She asked sincerely. Ahsoka raised a dismissive hand and shook her head slightly. That isn't my point here. Regardless of the intentions, you succeeded. That point, Ahsoka added, was to eliminate the effort from the attempt. You would have failed or succeeded because you didn't try. Now, your success is giving me serious doubts about how this came into our possession, Ani. She relayed, holding the hilt out in front of her. It was payment for a contract on me, ultimately funneled down to a no-name bounty hunter that failed miserably. The payment was made by a close partisan of the Emperor, meaning it came from him directly. If I may add some measure of knowledge to this conversation, Zar spoke to Kawani. Yes, of course, Kawani thought in return, but said, Tracker, possibly? I have sensed nothing. Besides, we were planetside on Dagobah long enough to have been traced with nothing to show for it, Ahsoka said a moment later. Zar may have some input here. He was there, after all, said Kawani. Ahsoka rolled her eyes to herself. I'm all ears, she said sarcastically, lolling her head over in Kawani's direction. And how do we do this? Kawani asked Zar quickly. Repeat after me, he responded quizzically. Oh, yeah, okay. I thought you had something more elaborate in mind. Simple is best sometimes, he returned. Ahsoka stared at Kawani expectantly, then understood the nuances involved. Kawani began. While you are limited in your interactions with tangibility, I have the luxury of no parameters in the matter. I have wielded the saber, stuttering on the word, and as such have an intimate knowledge of it, inside and out. I assure you that the saber hilt has no stowaway assemblies or components. Perhaps simplicity is the most logical reasoning then. It is just a thing, after all. That makes even less sense to me then, Ahsoka said, wrinkling her nose. A lone bounty hunter? Again, I should interject. Zar, through Kawani, responded. The original company had 6 members. If you check the crew quarters aboard, you will see more than one lone individual occupied them. Ahsoka lifted an eyebrow, agitated at herself for not inspecting the vessel more thoroughly, and for assuming things she had not vetted properly. 2 former crew were dispatched to Mos Espa, and an additional 2 were sent to Anchorhead. The 5th and last had been purposefully inebriated and was face down on the table beside me, Anam, in the cantina. Kawani stopped and shook her head. So the attack was you then, she spoke aloud. No, Zar continued through Kawani. Precisely the opposite, Miss Yaman. Ahsoka could not help but think how bizarre this interaction must be for Kawani. Anam's intentions were clear enough when he sat down. His minion, Devron, was quite susceptible to inhabitation and imbibed far too much. Anam was quite upset with him, so he was unwilling to make a move on his own. It took quite the effort to move him, and he fought for control with abandon. The carelessness of the attack would have more than likely left everyone for dead, but I did my best to arrest him in the end. Ahsoka raised a hand, beckoning for silence. By this admission, you were the direct cause of the confrontation. Directly, yes, but had I not gotten the beast under control, Miss Yamat might have been killed. Stop calling me that, Kawani said immediately. Apologies, Ani. The point is, he had come prepared, and you, Ahsoka, were his target. He had successfully hunted down Jedi in the past, which brings me back, full circle, to my point regarding simplicity. Owning the saber of a Jedi Master may have well been enough motive. All this theory regarding the saber brings me back to my original frustration, and yes, directly you, Ahsoka said, staring deep into Kawani's eyes. Zar felt the direction of the question. Why did you even get involved? Ah, the heart of the matter. Zar through Ani, let the statement echo for a moment. Master Yoda was right, Ahsoka. You will always carry the memory of Mortis with you. How can you not sense the enormity of who you are, Ahsoka Tano? Forget about prophecies as told by either allegiance. You know the Force is real, and that is all that there is to know. Look in the mirror, young one, and finally see what everyone else does. Then, and only then, ask me why I would get involved. The question should be, why not get involved, Tsar finished. No one spoke for a moment. Ahsoka, letting the words mingle throughout her, turned to stare out the canopy into the spiraling nexus of hyperspace. Kawani, resting her hands on her knees, caught up on her breathing, stared objectively at Ahsoka. She too could see what Zar had abstractly described, and wondered why it was so hard for the Togruta to be comfortable within herself. Ahsoka, Kawani said, I can feel the truth of his words. The Force itself has respect for you that I've never seen before. It wraps itself around you protectively, like a child, but as if you're its mother or father. Currents like that don't exist, Ahsoka. Not even Master Yoda affected that love, for lack of a better word. Without further coaxing, Kawani let the words register, then stood up to leave the cockpit. She reached the doorway and turned around. You don't need a mirror, Ahsoka. With all the past before you, look at what you prioritize over everything else. She spoke the words softly and with compassion, smiled, and left for the cargo bay. Ahsoka had not taken her eyes off the vortex before her, but had heard every word. Despite the irrational dangers ahead, she was yet again putting the lives of the innocent before her own. She closed her eyes and thought immediately of Jedi Master Plo Koon. Because someone did the same for me. She gripped the saber hilt tightly for a final time and returned it to her hip, brushing her hand over the newest addition to her arsenal. Reflexively, she quickly pulled her hand back, forgetting its place at her side, then slowly moved to remove it. Her grip was firm around the oddly cold cylinder. There were no questions in her mind at all about this saber as she brought it up before her. In its creation, she had poured herself into the effort, had swaddled it with passion and infused it with raw emotion. It now contained equal parts reverence and malice, devotion and hatred, forbearance and rage. It is then balanced, she knew. Through it, she felt again the purpose for which it was constructed. Balance. She spoke the word. Balance in so many things, she thought, but most accurately from the past. Although I'm a bit aged in the art of lightsaber combat, the forms are easy to describe, Tsar said to Kawani. You seem to have attained the basics of Shicho, which would suffice as a defensive technique that plies toward immediate blaster interaction. Refocusing the bolts would employ the Shien form, regarding Makashi, Saresu, and Ataru for now, disregarding. I have no idea what you just said, Kawani responded. You are decent enough with Form 1 to employ it against moderately skilled infantry. However, the possession of an energy blade also creates an opportunity of sorts to redirect their fire. This would employ basic knowledge of Form 5, bypassing Forms 2 through 4, he simplified. Kawani, sweating again, deactivated the blade and slowly placed her hands on her knees, crouching to regain her breath. This is just one form? How many are there? 6 known to me, but I am sure there are others. I was never adept in lightsaber combat, but my former master required me to learn and retain a certain level, he finished with a slight pause at the end. Tsar, how did you learn? Kawani asked. Learn what? Well, everything, I guess. The master you've mentioned a few times now, or even before that, she felt humbled asking the question. Darth Imperius was her name. He hesitated, considering the benefits and impediments elaboration would elicit. He could feel her involuntary response to the title with quick inward tension, but she relaxed just as quickly, giving him a cue to continue. I do not recall much before being her apprentice, so there remains a vacancy in my memories. She was a dedicated practitioner of the Force and a steadfast devotee of the Sith. Her skill in lightsaber combat was astonishing, and she quickly found disfavor with me upon learning we did not have the same beliefs. I have always been fond of the Force, respect, if you will, whereas she sought to control it and bend it to her will at all costs. I would spend my time meditating to her displeasure, but she would accost me and force me to learn how to employ the forms with a modicum of success. Beyond that, we had almost no interaction. She would leave me to prayers for weeks on end in search of a new apprentice, I found out later. Her aggressive nature led to her ultimate failure, but not before rending a rift within the Force that was powerful enough to alert the Jedi to her machinations. She had desecrated that which I found sacred, and had invaded my sanctuary with the intent to transform it into an abomination of her will. I assisted her new apprentice in her defeat, and withdrew completely into the Force, leaving my corporeal form to rot. Kawani, I have seen a lot since then. There is a wave of change coming that will directly affect both realms with ferocity. Whether it is a confluence of avergence, I do not know, only that the Force is preparing itself for something. That is a lot of information, but thank you, Tsar. I know memory can sometimes be painful, and everyone has one. Kawani's thoughts were quite sincere. Your compassion is perhaps your greatest gift, young Mirialan, Tsar said. I thought it was my innate skill with the lightsaber, she quickly fired back. Tsar paused before saying, I am sure I will grow accustomed to your elaborate sense of humor over time. Ignite the saber, and I will show you the Form 5 sequence. Shien, she stated. Ah, you were paying attention. Please consider a like and sub. It is YouTube's way of getting these to more people. I am less concerned with subs as I am with getting the story out there, and I need your help to do that. Thank you.